Thanks very much, Steve, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to pay my respect and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, past and present. We live in an exciting time in waste management in New South Wales. We've adopted a new waste strategy. We've got the first tranche of new waste infrastructure opening. We have the next round of funding and the introduction of a state-based container deposit scheme. Times are certainly changing. As I mentioned during this talk last 2 years ago, that the allocation of Waste Less, Recycle More was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a funding opportunity that we needed to grab with both hands. I often say to people that when we were dreaming up this program, we were concerned that no one would show up and no one would be ready. But they did. We have more than 325 approved projects across almost 20 funding streams. Local councils have activated more than 520 projects using the Better Waste and Recycling Fund to deliver local waste and recycling initiatives to their communities. Before I get into this talk, the EPA and I would like to thank everyone across local government, industry, non-for-profits and consultants for working in a collaborative way with the EPA to deliver this outstanding achievement. The successful start of the first 2 years of Waste Less, Recycle More is really a credit to the hard work and vision of each and every one of you, and for that we thank you. I don't propose to spend too much time looking back over the first 2 years in details. Many of the talks over the next couple of days are showcasing projects that our partners have developed under Waste Less. However, I'd like to mention a couple of key success stories. You will see at the conference a short 1-minute slideshow that gives some of the key outcomes that have been achieved in the first 2 years. We've also prepared a simple infographic with this information. Please take a copy away with you and share it with your colleagues so that you can get a copy of this at our booth, and please take it away. Because I think we really don't do this often enough, is to take away the achievements and reflect on them and acknowledge the work everyone has achieved. So please do that with your own teams. The EPA and the Environmental Trust has stayed resolute, only funding projects that offer value for money, divert significant tonnages of material away from landfill and back into the economy, or provide community with valuable infrastructure to make it easier for householders and businesses to manage their waste. This may at times have been frustrating for some, but we are very confident that the funding that has been allocated will deliver real and lasting change. There are 4 key facts that I'd like to draw to your attention. We've invested in infrastructure that is projected to divert more than 870,000 tonnes of waste from landfill in the first 2 years of Waste Less. We have undertaken waste assessments in more than 8,000 small medium businesses across New South Wales. And we provided more than 443,000, and it's right number, 443,000 new organic bins and kitchen caddies to our communities. These figures, by any stretch of the imagination, are impressive, and this is only the first 2 years. Now, the next bit is really talking about delivering on what we said we'd do. Waste Less, Recycle More is more than just funding. I hope you're now starting to see our bona fides. For this initiative to deliver real and lasting change, it needs to be anchored in an integrated education program, infrastructure and enforcement. For those that have already visited the EPA's display stand, this is the message we've emblazoned across our booth. During the same speech last year, I committed that the EPA would deliver 3 actions over the next 12 months. Deliver a new education strategy, deliver a new infrastructure needs analysis for landfills and recycling capacity, and develop a program to better tackle waste crime in the sector. We have delivered on our promise to complete these 3 actions. With the help of Graham Collier, Jade Herriman and a fantastic local government reference group, we have released a comprehensive education strategy called Changing Behaviour Together. It's the behaviour change glue that brings the community and industry along with the waste and recycling journey. And this afternoon you'll hear Danielle Carter and Janet Sparrow talk about the new strategy. It's a document that we're very proud of, and we're keen for your feedback because we need your help in delivering clear and consistent messages to the community. We've been working with Angus Johnson and the team from KMH to pull together a new infrastructure needs analysis and also looking at our long-term landfill needs. We need to carefully align our infrastructure delivery against our projected waste needs and changing demographics. And this afternoon you will be able to hear from Zach Thomas and Michael McGee talk about the work to align the 2021 targets against our infrastructure requirements. And finally, I'm pleased to say that we have started work with our fellow law enforcement agencies to investigate the scrap metal sector, much to the pleasure of Grant Musgrove, and the need for that sector, in particular, for a whole of government response to the criminal activities that we know occurs in that sector. I can't talk too much about this exercise, only to say that the teams are out on the ground as we speak. These three pieces of work really highlight our commitment to delivering best practice in education, infrastructure and enforcement. They're our themes. These are the principles that underpin the EPA's work. Over the last 3 years, we've delivered significant reforms, and many of these reforms come from the original work undertaken by David Richmond and from the feedback that you all provided during the Waste Levy Review. However, there's a famous JFK quote that I think rings true for our time. Change is the law of life, and those who only look to the past and present are certainly to miss the future. Not only has Waste Less Recycle More grant funding kept us busy over the last 2 years, we've been putting in place the fundamental building blocks. We have been planning for the future and making sure the fundamentals are in place. We've released a new waste strategy, resource recovery strategy, 2014 to 2021, and benchmarked that against world best practice. Working together with councils, we've got in place 13 regional waste strategies across New South Wales. We're rolling out a new waste regulation that introduces new standards and technologies. We're implementing an illegal dumping strategy. We're consulting on a new education strategy, and we're in the final throes of finalising a statewide litter prevention strategy and infrastructure strategy. This has been about getting a clear and integrated game plan in place to drive change and to deliver against the government's objectives. But change is not easy, and we often don't get it right, but believe me, we do it with the best intentions. For us, it's about balance. It's the balancing act of environment protection and human health protection against the need for resource recovery. Do we always get it right? No. This is a difficult balancing act in a very dynamic environment. There are the political realities operating within government, the broader reforms across local government that are occurring at the moment, an evolving knowledge base. And some people probably aren't aware, we're doing world-leading research on the environmental contaminants in mixed waste compost from alternative waste treatment plants. We also work in a highly reactive market system that responds very quickly to change. But it doesn't mean you don't try new things, and our eyes are definitely on the horizon. How do we implement reforms that we hold the waste sector will hold the waste sector in good stead for the inevitable change that's going to occur? We are halfway through this decade, and the environment in which we all operate is changing at a much faster rate. The question is, how do we build together a resilient system? There are going to be significant structural changes that are occurring and will occur over the next 10 to 20 years. And you may want to call them megatrends, if you will. The first of these will be fundamental changes in the way we live and who we are, and all of these changes have significant effects on the waste we generate, the way we collect it, recover and manage it. The first of these changes is changing demography. The recent discussion on the Dr. Karl's intergenerational report, I use the Dr. Karl thing loosely, made me start to think about some of the fundamental shifts that are occurring in the community. The planners are telling us there will be 2 million additional people living in New South Wales in the next 20 years. The proportion of people living in Sydney will increase from 59% to 64%. The number of people per house will decrease. The proportion of households with a single person or just a couple is going to increase. The population will get older. Currently 1 in 50 are aged over 85. This will increase to 1 in 33. These macro demographic shifts in population are going to affect waste management. Is that me? Nope, sorry. The second one is the way we live. The proportion of people living in regional New South Wales will decrease from 24 to 20% in the next 20 years. The spin-off effect of that is that more people are going to be living in Sydney and along our New South Wales coastal fringe. The future of Sydney will be increased urban density around the major transport nodes. In the next 20 years, Sydney will need to accommodate 664,000 new homes and an additional 661,000 jobs. So these are very large, significant changes to the way that New South Wales is going to operate. Western Sydney will grow faster than any other part of New South Wales, and almost 1 million people will live west of Homebush by 2031. To accommodate this growth, we will continue to see a shift in housing type from the traditional freestanding dwelling to higher density forms of multi-unit dwellings. Do we have the waste and resource recovery systems to cope with this change? That's the question we pose. And I think listening to both Veena and Jack, we're working in an environment where the material types we're handling continue to change. And it's always a great privilege to share the stage with Veena. I'm always amazed at the innovative work that her team does at Uni in New South Wales. But we continue to face the challenges of dealing with more complex material types in the waste stream. And if we are really honest, we often have little opportunity to influence some of the materials, as they often come to us imported. As working on the Australian Packaging Covenant Council, we see this struggle firsthand to get our collective arms around sustainable packaging. We are facing the challenge of dealing with materials made from composite materials, such as small yogurt pouches, and the perennial issue of plastic bags and the use of microbeads in various personal care products. But I don't think it means we give up. We need to give it a go. And New South Wales is taking a lead on a number of these issues. Australian Environment Ministers has asked New South Wales and the EPA to examine options to better deal with the use of single-use plastic bags and microplastics by the end of 2015. The world's production of plastics materials has been increasing over the past 20 years at a rate of 5% a year. In 2010, we produced more than 265 million tonnes of new plastic. Around 2 million plastic bags are consumed in New South Wales each year, which is amazing for a population of 7 million people, but go figure, with an estimated 10 million entering the environment as litter. New information has started to emerge on the impact of microbeads in personal care and cleaning products. Did you know that there can be almost 3 million individual microbeads in a single bottle of detergent? Work done by Professor Emma Johnson and her team at the Sydney Institute of Marine Science has identified significant quantities of microbead plastic and microplastic pollution in Sydney Harbour. And just last week, the EPA convened a stakeholder forum with industry and scientists to discuss this emerging issue. And the real challenging for this issue is then taking the next step to establish whether the contaminants on these very small pieces of plastic are actually entering the food chain. Now, we're working in an area of commodities and market volatility. We now live in a highly interrelated global economy where goods and services move freely across boundaries. We are in the commodity business, and we have seen in the past years the real shifts in the prices of raw commodities, with falling prices for key commodities such as oil and iron ore. If we in the waste industry space are to compete with these raw materials, we are going to be susceptible to these market fluctuations and changes in prices. The question in my mind is, how do we build a resource recovery economy that is resilient to these external market forces? Information management in a digital age is key. We are firmly of the view that if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. Many of the environmental issues that we face in the waste space are highly contested. Why? Because we don't have credible and consistent data. New South Wales has some of the best data sets in the country, and particularly around waste audits of municipal waste and commercial industrial waste. And you'll hear from Anne Prince and Alex Young on Thursday about the latest results from the 2014 C&I waste audits. But the main stumbling block that we continue to face is the capture of waste and recycling, litter and illegal dumping data real time. The challenges that we all face is, how do we explain the success of our programs, be it in recycling or illegal dumping, if we cannot demonstrate measurable change to the community and to government? The recent waste regulation reforms are really around providing a sound platform for the capture of good quality waste and recycling data at landfills and recycling centres. If we are to be taken seriously as an industry whose goal is to circulate materials back into the productive economy, then I'm afraid that we are going to have to act like any other material producer and record our inputs and outputs. The EPA has recently conducted a survey of waste facilities that will come into the new licensing framework from August. And that survey really was quite shocking. It revealed that the majority of the facilities don't record or report inputs or outputs. And even some operators acknowledged that some of their material rarely leaves their site. I don't know why you'd say that to the EPA in a survey, but they did. But oh, how things are going to change. I believe the introduction of data recording and capture systems such as weighbridges will mean that New South Wales is on the path to modernisation. The waste regulatory reforms are much about modernising and transforming the sector and making it harder for the dodgy operators to survive. Whilst we allow a system that does not provide a minimum regulatory standard on data capture and retention, then we'll always let the rogues get away with it. Modern data analytics will also mean that we can identify waste trends and market failures before they occur. Last year, New South Wales acted quickly by injecting an additional $1.5 million of funding to recycle the growing stockpile of CRT glass. We were getting very nervous and hearing a lot of scuttlebutt about it, and we went around to the sector and we looked and we identified 5,000 tonnes of processed and unprocessed glass that wasn't going anywhere. If we had the data systems that provide oversight on the movements of materials in and out of waste facilities, we could have jumped on this issue much quicker and to avoid this market failure. Now, if we go back to think about the JFK quote about change that I mentioned earlier, in short, it's saying that the change is inevitable and that we must look forward to identify emerging opportunities. So thinking about the future, more people living in our cities in greater densities in multi-unit dwellings. And each of these households are getting smaller and older. We're going to be dealing with materials that we haven't seen yet, and in communities that want better and more convenient services at a lower cost. And we're going to be dealing with a changing behaviour environment. Consumers are dramatically changing the way what goods they purchase and how they go about purchasing them, and particularly on the online space. Now think about what the impact of a mature food and garden waste processing sector, the introduction of energy from waste, container deposits, extended producer responsibility, community resistance to new waste facilities, and loss of access to cheap overseas commodity markets. If we think about this scenario, we're thinking about a very different operating context than what we have today. I believe that we have the fundamentals in place, but the next challenge from a policy context is how do we build a waste and resource recovery sector that is resilient to cope with this change. At the EPA, we are starting to do some work around how we prepare ourselves to take up this opportunity and the challenges that it's going to present in a project we call 2025. The question will be, what type of waste and resource system do we want? The cheapest possible, or a sector that truly embraces the idea of a circular economy? How do we collect, transport and recover these materials? Should we start investing in further downstream processing of materials rather than relying on cheap overseas export markets? These will be some of the key issues that we need to address. The EPA's reform program is intended to get the fundamentals right and get them in place. Recording and reporting of waste using weighbridges, regulating those operators that have a material effect on the market, ensuring that communities have the capacity to treat and dispose of their own waste, using new electronic tracking systems to make it easier for waste generators to do the right thing with their waste and make it harder for the rogue operators to get away. So, I would like to thank you all for your support and hard work in getting Waste-Recycle more off the ground. And I know some of these changes might be challenging for some, but stay with us, our intentions are good. The theme of the EPA booth this year is Let's Talk, so please come and talk to the team and give us your ideas and comments. But before I go, I need to do one more plug. From 1 March this year, if the EPA receives a report from the public of littering from a motor vehicle, then the EPA will issue the owner of the vehicle with a fine, typically $250. So please get on our website and download the EPA Litter Reporting app. We've had more than 5,000 people download the app within 2 months. If you see a tosser when you're driving, please report it to the EPA and let's stamp out littering along our roads and highways. Thank you.